Thanks everyone for coming, and I guess we'll make a start, and that keeps us all on time. So if I introduce myself, first of all, my name's Owen Atkinson, a vet, a cattle vet, working not far away from here in the Shropshire, Cheshire region. And my partner in crime is Duncan Hughes, who's a dairy farmer at Cheddleton, not far away from here. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the pregnancy test, the chemical pregnancy test, PAG test, a little bit about the science. I'll talk about 15 minutes or so on that, and Duncan will talk about his experience of using it on farm, on his herd, and then we'll open for questions for a few minutes after that. So if I just get a hands up, just a bit of an idea of the sort of knowledge in the room, if you like. Just hands up if you're already familiar with this PAG pregnancy test. Hands up. Jen is. Duncan is. Danuta is. So not many of you. And yet it's been around for a few years. I'm just going to introduce a bit of the history, if you like, of pregnancy testing in cows. So I'm a dairy vet. I've spent most of my life, I've been working for 30 odd years, and a lot of that time was spent doing pregnancy testing. And when I qualified in 1994, it was all done manually. So hands up who remembers vets still not using a scanner but manually pregnancy testing. The old James Herriot way. And it's a dying art now. Here's a picture of my good friend Peter Edmondson doing some manual pregnancy test in Zimbabwe. That's the James Herriot way, the green arm. And prior to the 1990s, nearly all pregnancy testing was done like this for many, many years. And it's effective, not bad. Most vets, like myself, when I was in practice, I would be happy doing it down to about 6 weeks in calf. Occasionally, I'd push myself and go a little bit lower at 5 weeks. But the lower you go, the more inaccurate it gets. So most vets did it at 6 to 8 weeks. It's a reasonably safe technique, but if you're doing it that early, just let you into the secret of it, you have to actually manipulate the uterus, and you do actually pinch the uterus, and you feel what's called a membrane slip. And just that process of pinching the uterus, it's quite gentle, but you could potentially squeeze the embryo, so you do have some risk of pregnancy loss by doing manual pregnancy testing. So then, in the late 80s and early 90s, so into sort of when I qualified now as a vet, we started to see the first pregnancy scanners. And originally, they were heavy old things, always needed to be plugged in, so you're not convenient to use. I'm guessing, Duncan, you will have remembered the first scanners when they came along. The vet would come with this big, heavy box. You'd have to find a plug, and you'd have to get an extension cable. And they were very expensive, so then only vet practice could only afford one per practice, and they were shared. But the advantage was that you could scan or pregnancy test a little bit earlier, from about 32 days. And I think the main advantage is that people like gadgets. Everyone likes to see a gadget, and the farmer can see the pregnancy on the screen, and I think that would be part of the attraction. And over time, scanning or scanners have become a little bit more sophisticated. Most of them are now battery operated. You can walk around the farm with them and use them in this way here. So hands up who's familiar with pregnancy scanning or pregnancy detecting this way. Who's seen this? This is what most pregnancy testing in the dairy industry in the UK is being done by at the moment. So it's mainly vets, but also some lay technicians do some scanning, and that's what it looks like. And as I say, scanners have improved a little bit. You've got rigid introducers. I don't know if you see that white thing that the vet there is handling. That's to save your arm, because when you're scanning a lot of cows, your arm does get quite tired. So that introducer can reduce the operator stress. And there's a few technological advantages that have happened, obviously. It still remains a skilled task to pregnancy test a cow using a scanner. So this sort of graphic is sort of showing really the evolution of pregnancy diagnosis in cows. So if you go back to the pre-1950s, there wasn't much pregnancy testing happening. It was just done with the old knock. Who's familiar with the old knock? Where you'd So you're familiar with the knock, the manual, the scanning, and the PAG test. So you've seen the whole gamut of pregnancy testing. Say again. Yeah, Jersey cows would be easier because they've probably got a little bit of a softer flank, and you just gently ballot them, and you could detect a pregnancy from about 4 months, 5 months really, because you need a reasonable sized calf. So that was sort of pre-50s, and then you got your manual pregnancy testing, which is green arming. Adapted more recently to scanning. And then from 2020 on, this chemical testing, PAG testing, has become available. Not widely used in this country, but more widely used in America and also in other European countries, which is interesting in its own right. Why isn't it used more widely here? The chemical pregnancy test I'm talking about, the PAG test, is very different to progesterone testing for pregnancy. I just want to make that clear at the start, because there is often, even amongst vets in this country, when I've worked with vets and vet practices talking about the PAG test, a lot of vets get confused and think it's progesterone testing. And progesterone testing is very different to PAG testing, and they'll say, oh, progesterone testing is not accurate, and so on and so on and so forth. That's not PAG testing. So I just want to make that distinction clear from the outset. I'm talking about something quite different, the PAG test. So what is the PAG test? So PAG is short for pregnancy-associated glycoprotein, and it's produced by the embryo only if it's alive and only after placenta attachment. And attachment happens at around about 19 days. I've got a little diagram here to show what happens. I don't think I've got a fancy laser pointer, so I'll just use my finger. So sperm fertilizes egg on day 0, and that happens in the oviduct. That sort of floats up towards the body of the uterus, so it's growing all the time as it does. So, in the first week, it's still free. This little embryo is free floating in the oviduct, or the fallopian tubes is the other word for that. It goes into the body of the uterus, and then it's like a spaceship touching down on Jupiter. This is so. This little embryo here, it sends messages to mum. So this is mum, this is the lining of the uterus, and this is the embryo, and it's sending very early messages, chemical messages. The first one that's detectable is called interferon tau, and basically that's the embryo telling mum, don't come in heat again because you'll flush me away. Because this is all happening around about 2 or 3 weeks, 2 weeks really, after insemination. So that little messaging, chemical messaging from the embryo is massively important. And then you get touchdown, so like I say, it's like a spaceship touching down on planet Jupiter, where the embryo touches down onto the lining of the uterus. And at this point, it sends a very strong chemical message, and this is PAG, pregnancy-associated glycoproteins. There's actually 22 or more, probably, of these glycoproteins, which are chemical messages sent from the embryo to mum. And they are detected from about day 19 onwards, because that's when touchdown happens. Does that make sense? They are very specific for pregnancy. No pregnancy, no PAG. Simple as that. So the PAG test that's developed by IDEXX. IDEXX is an American testing company. Danuta at the back of the room. Where's Danuta? Danuta at the back of the room. She will answer questions later if anyone wants to ask more details around the actual technicalities of the test. But it's developed by IDEXX, marketed around the world, and has been... When was it first developed, Danuta? I mean, I'm guessing 1990s, really.
First test was developed in 2011. That was from blood, and then 2012 from milk.
So I said the 1990s because I do remember when I was at vet school, and I was at vet school between 1989 and 1994, I remember the teachers, the professors and whatnot were teachers, they'd always say to us, if you want to be a farm vet, you've got to get used to the idea that you will not be earning your living putting your hand at the backside of cows, because this technology will come. PAG was known certainly in the 1990s, and we've been waiting. We're waiting for this technology to really come to the marketplace. It is now in the marketplace. And IDEXX have brought it to the marketplace through their pregnancy tests. So this is just to show you what a 19-day embryo looks like. It's just a couple of centimeters long, and it's this embryo, when it embeds, that is producing the chemical message PAG, which is picked up by the test. So it's an accurate test. It can be used reliably from 28 days. So I said that the embryo is producing it from around about 19 days. I'll explain just why you wouldn't use it that early. So basically, you've got no PAG until here, where this little embryo touches down and embeds into the uterus. Then it starts producing PAG, and it goes up exponentially from that point onwards. In terms of individuals, every individual is different. So in some cows, the level of PAG might be quite low. And of course, you're measuring it in milk. If you've got a cow that's giving 50 litres of milk, that PAG is going to be more dilute than in a cow that's only giving 10 litres of milk. So For that reason, I think if I press my button, it will show you, the test is validated to be used from 28 days. Because by 28 days, every cow, whether she's giving 50 litres or 10 litres or 20 litres, should have enough detectable PAG in it if she's pregnant. There will still perhaps be the odd cow that's in a recheck zone, and therefore they need to be rechecked. But basically, if you're measuring PAG in a cow and she's 28 days calved and there's no PAG, she ain't pregnant. You could bet your bottom dollar on that she isn't pregnant. Right, so start test from 28 days, because I think that's one of the main reason is just that every cow will be captured by 28 days. There is another reason, and I guess it gets a bit technical here, is the earlier you go with pregnancy diagnosis, I mean, what would be the reason for going early? Why would there be an advantage of sort of trying to detect pregnancy earlier and earlier and earlier? To find your empty cow so you can resert them. Thank you, sir. So that's your prime thing. That's the reason why scanning technology is developed. It's the reason why scanning would be better than manual. Manual could detect it from 42 days. Scanning, you go down to 32 days. PAG, you go down 28 days. These are only sort of small incremental improvements, but it does mean that you can detect those empty cows sooner, get them back in calf, hopefully, and that is all to do with your profitability of producing milk. However, if you go earlier and earlier and earlier, let's say you went down to 21 days, let's say there was, you know, a reliable pregnancy testing method that you would use at 21 days, what would be the disadvantage? Or 18 days? Well, even if they weren't in the recheck zone, Jem, the earlier you go, the more risk there is of actually that embryo not surviving, so you'll get false positives. So at 19 days, yes, the cow might be pregnant, but will that pregnancy survive? Are you with me? Now, that's the other reason why 28 days is a key number. 28 days is a key number because it's beyond 90% of pregnancies. If they are there at 28 days, they'll go to full term. It's a pretty safe sort of stage. The embryo's embedded. It ain't going to be lost unless something horrible happens. So that's the reason for 28 days. Or the other reason. And this is what a 28-day pregnancy looks like. So a little bit bigger. The actual embryo itself is tiny. It lives in a little fluid-filled sac. And that's what you're looking for when you're scanning. You're scanning and you see a little 10 millimeter, 1 centimeter size embryo in a fluid-filled sac. And that's really when you're scanning. You're looking for the fluid and you search around a bit, see if you can find the viable embryo, see if you can see a heartbeat, and that would be a pregnancy. Okay, so IDEXX PAG test can be used from 28 days and it's produced by a healthy placenta and embryo, but you can use it throughout the whole of pregnancy. PAG continues to be produced. What you wouldn't do, this graph shows PAG levels from day 0 right the way through to full term. They do tend to go up, but you wouldn't overinterpret your results. You wouldn't look at a PAG result for a cow and see that it's very high and say, oh, she must be 3 months in calf as opposed to 2 months in calf. Just use it as a in calf, not in calf. In calf, not in calf. Don't try and age the pregnancy by using the data. And Duncan, I'm sure you are very familiar with that. You just use it as yes, no. Yeah. In calf, not in calf. Yeah? Yeah. But just to show that you can use it as a recheck test. If you're a bit unsure, has she lost her pregnancy, hasn't she? PAG will be valuable right the way through. I think, it's a minor thing, but as a vet, sometimes when you've got these mummified fetuses that they still feel like they're pregnant, but they're just not developing as you might think if you're manually scanning them or palpating them. The PAG test will be very useful in that circumstance because you could see, well, is it viable or isn't it viable? Just a little caveat on that is it does take a few days, about a week, for the PAG levels to start to fall from being very high. This is after an early pregnancy loss. After a full-term pregnancy, so imagine this cow, she gives birth to a full-term calf. If you PAG test her a week later, she'll still have traces of PAG in her system. So the recommendation again from IDEXX and the companies that offer this commercially, so CIS, NMR, QMMS, would say don't test your cow until they've been calved for at least 60 days. Now, there won't be many circumstances, if any, when you would want to test a cow in under 60 days after she's had her previous calf, but it might be one to bear in mind if a cow aborts. because it takes a while for PAG to disappear. Does that make sense? Best time to check for pregnancy, I think I've sort of covered this. You can go too soon. If you go too early, too many pregnancies are lost. Go too late, you're sort of missing the opportunity of detecting your negatives as early as possible. So ideally, this 4 to 5 week mark is good. And that's assuming the test is reliable and accurate. So why use PAG testing over scanning? And you can use both, and I'm an independent on this. I see pros and cons of each method. In terms of accuracy, there's nothing in it. If you want to get really, really detailed about this, you get they're both 99% accurate at 32 days. When you're scanning, you get slightly more false negatives, and that means, in actual fact, is that that's operator error. You're scanning the uterus, you miss the pregnancy. You might then inject the cow with prostaglandin, she comes bulling, and no one would ever know. So that's what I mean by slightly more false negatives. Whereas PAG, you don't get false negatives. If there's no PAG, there ain't no pregnancy. With PAG, you get slightly more false positives, and that's because of this slight lag phase from, let's say you had an early pregnancy, let's say it gets to 25 days. But then the embryo, for whatever reason, fades away and dies. It can take a few days for those PAG levels to drop right down. So you test her at 28 days, there's still some residual PAG chemical that might be detected in the milk. So you might say, oh, she's pregnant, but in actual fact, the embryo's dead. But it's negligible because the headline figure is both are very, very accurate, 99%. So the potential benefits of milk PAG testing, from my perspective, would be, as a vet, well, there's no need to segregate the cow, and there's several benefits on that. A lot of it is being backed up by more recent research in America showing that the cow milk production is affected when they're segregated for scanning, whereas, Duncan, you'll maybe say this in a minute, is why you use it. You take your milk test and cow doesn't, no change in routine.
So much less stressful.
Do you want to use your microphone, Duncan?
Yeah, it's so much less stressful. You don't have to sort them out for the vet. It's quite a big job wading amongst the cows, get a few out, and yeah, it's just handy just getting the one out for the vet rather than having PD everything.
Yeah. So that no segregation would be a big benefit. It's non-invasive. This can potentially be a bit of a can of worms, and I'm in a dairy-friendly environment here, so I'll just make a few words about this, perhaps. Putting your hand up the backside of a cow, we do it all the time. We do it for AI, obviously, and it's kind of accepted within the dairy industry, and it has a lot of benefits, particularly AI over natural service. But I think if we can probably try and reduce the amount of unnecessary times we put our arms at the backside of a cow, from a welfare point of view, that's no bad thing. So that's with my veterinary hat on. It's simple and convenient, which Duncan will no doubt talk about why you use it, the convenience factor. Again, with my veterinary hat on, I would argue it's a more efficient use of skilled veterinary time. What vets do for farmers now is a lot more than just putting your arms at the backside of cows. And there's only so much money you want to spend with your vet, and if you want to choose to spend it by paying for your vet to put their arms up the backside of your cows, then so be it. But there might be other things that you could be using your vet for. Potentially, it's got this slightly more earlier detection of pregnancy, which means as long as you're doing the test regularly, so like on a weekly basis, say, you will be picking up your negatives sooner, which comes back to the main advantage of early pregnancy testing. A couple of things that PAG testing won't do that scanning would. One is you can't age the pregnancy. The second is it wouldn't tell you whether the cow is carrying twins or not. There are some farms where that's very valuable because they'll manage their twin-carrying cows separately during the dry period. I said that there was some study in the USA just demonstrating the impact of segregating cows for pregnancy testing. This is a large commercial herd in Texas. They assigned their cows randomly to either having a scan, ultrasound scan, or pregnancy test using PAG testing. They found that the cows that were tested using the PAG test, because they weren't segregated, gave more milk on that day and more milk on the following day. So the knock-on effect is the second day, really. But over the course of a week, the cows that were pregnancy tested using the PAG test, they actually gave 3.8 litres more than the cows that had the manual, or the, I say manual, but the ultrasound pregnancy test. So just to illustrate really the effect of segregating cows for ultrasound scanning. And also, in addition to just the milk yield effects, the hypothesis is that it was because of the altered cow's behavior. So not only are they away from feed and their beds for a little bit longer in that first day, but on the second day they have slightly altered behavior because of being segregated and rectal examined on the previous day. So summary, yes. To answer the question at the beginning, is it possible to pregnancy test through milk? Yes, it is. The PAG test, don't confuse it with progesterone milk testing, a very, very different technology. It is accurate, plenty of studies on that. It can be used at any time during pregnancy, but from 28 days, so it can be used early. It's available in this country through milk recording organisations, that's how it's done. So by that, CIS, NMR, QMMS, Danuta, can I check, would they be the three that are offering it in the UK? There's no need to segregate cows, so those benefits would include more yield, less stress for the cow, potentially better time use for the vet and the farmer. That's it from me. Duncan, can I introduce you, and perhaps if you just, in your words, say what your perspective is of using PAG?
Thanks, Owen. Well, we've milked about 100 pedigree cows up in the Staffordshire moorlands. We're always on a sort of all-round year calving system. But about 5 years ago, Muller changed the milk price where they were trying to get more milk in the autumn, and they were going to get pretty hefty penalties for spring milk, and we were sort of drifting that way. So traditionally, we've always had the vet come once a month to do the fertility visit, and we needed to tighten things up really. And so my friend, she did scanning. She used to come a week or so before the vet so we could find the empty cows and then just put the right ones out. But it wasn't really viable for her to come and do a few at a time. And then we stumbled across the CIS preg check. And basically do it before they come. I mean, my wife's a milk recorder now, so it's quite handy because I'll send samples about once every week. And once you're over a month saved, I'll send some samples in. Then my vet still comes once a month, and he'll do like all me setups, that sort of thing, or any other problem cows or washouts or anything like that. But we're just making best use of his time, and I can tighten my calving block up. And when we first went towards this summer-autumn block, it's difficult just to get the milk where you want it, sort of August to November. And this last year or so, we are just getting somewhere now. We've calved a lot more in August. So it is just tightening things up how we want it to. I've learned since I've been asked to do this, you can actually have the preg check set on to do everything after 28 days, or apparently some people do it 6 weeks before calving, just make sure they are in calf before you dry them off. So it has got all sorts of uses, and I know it's quite interesting to see Owen's talk, pick up, just see the technical side of it, because we just see what the milk samples that go to CIS, and then you get your results a couple of days later that you have to look on your herd to find out. I don't know if there's anything else that you want to know off me.
Well, I think that's good. Thanks, Duncan. I think you'd said before the advantages to you. I think I know Danuta had asked you, why would you use PAG over scanning? Perhaps if you just say what the specific advantages to you are.
Yeah, it's the tightening up on timing. I need to know which cows are not in calf, then I can get the vet to set them up. Or we've just actually invested in the movement tags see if they're bulling. So that's another aid we're working on. Yeah. You just watch everything. You know what's not in calf. You need get them bulling and get them served and get them back in the calf.
And with my veterinary hat on, I'm very pleased to hear that you're not cutting your vet out of the equation. I think some people get worried that, if we use PAG testing instead of the vet to do the scanning, the vet will get cut out of the equation. Just hearing what you say, that's not the case.
No, well, we had Tracy Latham come the other day. She did scanning for us, and she's quite an advocate of it. It's a tool, just to be used. They're all tools. I still have to have the odd pregnancy scan. I had a cow the other day. I haven't seen a bulling for ages, but I'm sure this cow was in calf. But she kept showing up as not in calf on preg checks. So I'll get vet scanner, and she wasn't in calf, so it just proves it works, doesn't it?
Yeah. I guess we have a couple of minutes left, and it would be nice just to hear if anyone has any questions for myself or Duncan. I'll bring the microphone to you, and then everyone can hear what the question is, if that's all right.
No, I was just wondering there, it said 99% accurate at 32 days, recommended from 28 days. Is there any difference in accuracy between 28 and 32 days?
Yeah, yes, good question. It's more just about where the studies, the published papers, really. There's nothing appreciable about that 28 to 32. Nothing appreciable. So yeah, take it as read that it's 99% accurate from 28 days. Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, thanks. It might seem really basic, but I mean, if you're having your vet to test the cow's there, the vet's there, there's no doubt about which cow that test is being done on. If you're labelling milk tubes and sending them to and fro, is there any risk of misidentity?
Yeah, very much so. So if you're going into PAG testing, I think it'd be a good idea to think all these things through. So yes, it can be more convenient, but you've got to make sure you're not getting mixed up ID. If you get mixed up ID, you're going to be getting in a mess. And likewise, there is potential for cross-contamination. You need quite a lot of cross-contamination from the cow before, but I think some farmers have found this with Yonis testing, for example, where if you're not being careful about cross-contamination from the cow that was milked previously in that cluster point, in that point in the parlour, you could get cross-contamination of a Yonis test, and you can with the PAG test. Now, the evidence is that you need quite a lot of cross-contamination milk from the cow before. But things like that, those practical elements are definitely things to consider. So yes, very much so. Anything else? Did you want to say anything else? No. Thanks. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much, I think. Danuta, did you want to say anything? No? Well, thank you. We're on time. I know it was important for the organisers that we kept to time, so hopefully we get a bag of sweets, perhaps, Duncan, for doing that. So thank you very much for your attention, everyone. Thank you.